I have to be careful telling this story, because even now I'm not sure how much of it I should put into words. Some parts I've shared before, but other parts I've never told anyone. To understand what happened, you need to know where I came from. I grew up in a home where God was never mentioned, not in prayer, not in conversation, not even as a belief. The word itself simply didn't exist in our lives. The first time I ever heard someone use God as something real, not as a joke or a curse, I was 13 years old. And for some reason I still can't explain, something inside me reacted like a quiet pull, like I had just remembered something I had forgotten a long time ago. It wasn't comfort I felt. It was curiosity mixed with a strange, uneasy fascination. I needed to know more, so I started searching on my own. No one told me to. No one guided me. By the time I was 14, maybe 15, I had found a small church in a quiet town in Michigan. It wasn't a place anyone my age would normally go alone, but I kept coming back anyway. I first noticed it through a children's program on TV, where a soft-spoken minister talked directly to the camera like he was speaking to someone specific. Later, I saw the same man in person at the church, and he recognized me immediately, even though I was sure we had never met. He invited me to join the youth group, smiling in a way that should have felt kind, but instead made my stomach tighten for reasons I didn't understand. I had no background in religion, no framework for any of it, no idea what was normal and what wasn't. All I knew was that from the moment I stepped inside that building, it felt less like I had found the church, and more like the church had been waiting for me. I had no idea what a children's minister was actually supposed to do, or what normal church life even looked like. I didn't know what was typical and what wasn't. Walking into that place felt like stepping into a completely different world without a guide, without rules, without any way to tell if something was wrong. And there's something else you should understand about me, because it matters. I may have only been 14, but I had already lived through things that most people don't face, even in an entire lifetime. That kind of past changes you. It either turns you cold and suspicious of everyone, or it makes you desperate to believe that somewhere out there, people are still good. I was the second type. I wanted to trust. I needed to trust. Maybe I still do, so I listened to him. I attended the services. At first, everything seemed fine, more than fine, actually. The people were friendly, the atmosphere was warm, and for a short time, I honestly believed I had finally found the safe place I'd been searching for. A place where nothing bad would follow me. But one Sunday, after the service ended and most people had gone home, he invited me to his house. I didn't think much of it. Adults invited kids over all the time in church settings, right? When I stepped inside, the first thing I noticed was how neglected everything looked. The house felt heavy, stale, like the air hadn't moved in years. It was messy in a way that didn't feel normal, more like something had been abandoned, but was still being lived in. I remember thinking I should help clean up, that maybe he just needed someone to care enough to fix things. That urge in me, the one that always wants to help, kicked in immediately. I never got the chance. Only minutes after I walked through the door, something changed. The friendly, gentle tone he used at church disappeared, replaced by something colder, something that made my skin crawl before I even understood why. Then he moved closer, too close, and tried to touch me in ways that made it instantly clear. This was not kindness, not mentorship, not anything innocent. In that moment, it felt like the floor had vanished beneath my feet, not because I didn't understand what was happening, but because I did. I had seen this type of person before. I had survived people like him before. And I had come to that church believing, hoping, begging that this place would be different. Standing there in that suffocating house, I realized with a sickening certainty that I hadn't escaped anything at all. Somehow the darkness had followed me. Or maybe it had been waiting there long before I arrived. He wasn't hesitant. He wasn't unsure. He was forceful, the kind of force that doesn't come from confusion, but from experience. The way he grabbed at me felt practiced, like he had done this before, and expected it to end a certain way. There was no guilt in his eyes, no fear of being caught, just confidence. That's what terrified me the most. Somehow, I managed to twist away from him and reach the door. I remember my hand shaking as I grabbed the handle. He lunged again, trying to pull me back, but survival instinct took over. I shoved past him so hard he almost lost his balance. I didn't look back. I didn't stop running until the house was far behind me. And then, I told no one. I knew I should have. Even at 14, I knew staying silent was wrong. But knowing and doing are very different things when you're just a teenager, and he's a respected man with a title, a congregation, and decades of trust built around his name. Who would they believe? The new kid with no background in church? Or the minister everyone admired? I did the math in my head, over and over. Every version of the outcome ended the same way. Nobody would listen. So I buried it. I carried it alone. Over the years, I've thought about him more times than I can count. I've wondered if I was the first. I've wondered if I was the last. I've thought about the other kids in that program, younger, smaller, quieter, kids who might not have had the same survival reflex that got me to that door in time. That thought still keeps me awake some nights. I don't have answers. I only have this truth. I got out. And now, after all these years, I'm finally saying it out loud. When I was 16, my family moved to a small town just outside of Knoxville. New school, new house, new start. My mom always believed that the fastest way to feel settled somewhere was to join a church immediately. She said it gave you roots. And maybe she was right. The very first Sunday we walked into Calvary Road Fellowship, it felt like we had stepped into a warm embrace. Before the service even began, people were crossing the aisle just to shake our hands, smiling, welcoming, friendly, in that small-town way that makes you feel seen instantly. But as I stood there, smiling back, something cold slipped into my chest, because I had felt this before, the warmth, the welcome, the safety. And I had learned the hard way that sometimes the brightest places cast the darkest shadows. At first, the welcome felt comforting, the kind that makes you think, maybe this place is safe, maybe this time things will be different. That illusion lasted about 3 weeks. The pastor, a heavy-set man everyone called Brother Aldrich, took a special interest in my family almost immediately. He showed up with dinners, dropped by unannounced just to check on us, and surrounded my mom with that warm, old-fashioned Southern kindness she adored. She saw generosity. I saw something else. The way he watched people while they spoke didn't feel friendly. It felt observant, like he was quietly collecting pieces of you and storing them somewhere. One Sunday after the main service ended, he pulled me aside with a hand on my shoulder that lingered just a little too long. He told me about a youth fellowship that met downstairs in the basement. Invitation only, he said, smiling in a way that didn't quite reach his eyes. He told me I seemed like exactly the kind of young man they were looking for. At the time, I didn't question it. I wanted to belong. I wanted this church to be what it pretended to be. So I went downstairs. About a dozen teenagers were already there, sitting in a perfect circle on the cold, bare floor. No chairs, no decorations, just concrete walls and a strange heaviness in the air. The only light came from candles, dozens of them, arranged carefully around the circle like someone had measured every inch. In the center sat a wooden bowl filled with something dark and thick. I couldn't tell what it was from where I stood, but I remember thinking it didn't look like anything that belonged in a church. Before I could ask anything, Brother Aldrich stepped in behind me and quietly shut the door. The sound of the latch clicking into place felt far louder than it should have. He told us this was where the real worship happened, that the service upstairs was only for people who weren't ready yet. He spoke as if this were completely normal, as if secret basement gatherings lit by candlelight were just another part of Sunday routine. Then he asked everyone to close their eyes and breathe slowly. One by one, they obeyed. I hesitated, but eventually I did the same, not wanting to stand out. That's when he began to speak. The words weren't English. They weren't any language I had ever heard before. The sounds were low, rhythmic, almost vibrating in the air rather than simply spoken. It didn't sound like prayer. It sounded older, heavier, like something meant to be whispered underground, not inside a church. And as the strange syllables echoed off the concrete walls, I realized with a growing sense of dread that nobody else in the room seemed confused at all. I had been around churches where people spoke in tongues before, so I knew what that sounded like. It was emotional, chaotic, like words spilling out faster than they could be controlled. But this was nothing like that. Brother Aldrich's voice followed a steady rhythm, precise and deliberate, as if he were reading instructions from something only he could see. There was a pattern to it, pauses in the exact same places, tones rising and falling in a way that felt rehearsed. It didn't sound spiritual. It sounded methodical, cold, like a ritual rather than a prayer. At some point, curiosity overpowered fear, and I opened my eyes, even though we had been told not to. Every single candle was out, not flickering, not fading, just gone, all at once, as if the light had been swallowed, instead of extinguished. The basement was plunged into a darkness so thick I could barely make out the outlines of the other teenagers still sitting perfectly still in their circle, eyes closed, faces blank. And then I heard it, breathing, slow, deep, steady. It wasn't coming from any of the kids. It wasn't coming from Brother Aldrich, whose voice had gone completely silent. I could tell where everyone was by then, the faint shapes, the shifting of clothes, the tiny sounds people make without realizing. This was different. The sound came from the far corner of the basement, a corner where nothing had been before. It was the kind of breathing you might hear from something enormous, trying not to move, unhurried, patient, as if it had been there long before we arrived and had no intention of leaving. The room felt smaller with every inhale it took. Panic snapped through me. I stood up, my legs weak, and said I wasn't feeling well, that I needed to go upstairs. Before I could take a step, a hand clamped around my wrist. Brother Aldrich, his grip was painfully tight, fingers digging in like iron. He leaned close and told me that standing was disrespectful. The worst part wasn't the words, it was the smile on his face when he said them. Calm, pleasant, like nothing at all was wrong. Somehow that was far more terrifying than anger would have been. I yanked my arm free and stumbled toward the door, not caring anymore about being polite or quiet or invited. I just needed to get out. The moment I reached the upstairs sanctuary, the air felt lighter, like surfacing from deep underwater. I found my mom and told her I had a headache, my voice shaking so badly I could barely get the words out. She didn't argue. She took one look at me and gathered our things. In the car, with the church shrinking in the rearview mirror, I told her everything. The candles, the chanting, the breathing in the corner. She didn't interrupt. She didn't question me. She just drove in silence for a long time. Then, very quietly, she said we were never going back. And she meant it. About 4 months later, rumors started spreading through the town. Another family had begun asking questions about what really happened during those basement meetings. Questions that nobody at the church seemed willing to answer. When another family started asking about the basement meetings, Brother Aldrich didn't hesitate. He told them there had never been any such thing. No private gatherings, no invitation, only fellowship. Just rumors and misunderstandings. What shook me wasn't his denial, it was what happened next. Every single family in that congregation supported him. And worse, every teenager who had been sitting in that candlelit circle with me said it never happened. Not one of them slipped. Not one of them hesitated. It was like watching 12 people erase the same memory at the same time. But I know what I heard. I've replayed that night in my mind more times than I can count. I was in a sealed basement room with one door and no windows. I could account for every person inside it. And something in the corner was breathing, slow, steady, patient. Something I could not see and cannot explain. To this day, I can't sit comfortably in a room lit only by candles. It's not the darkness that unsettles me. It's the memory of how fast the light disappeared and what filled the space after it was gone. I don't know what Brother Aldrich was doing down there. I don't know what was inside that wooden bowl. I don't know what was in that corner. I only know this. I walked up those stairs and left that basement behind. But sometimes I wonder if the others ever truly did. When I think back to their faces in that final moment, eyes closed, expressions empty, it's like something had already taken root in them. And I've never been sure they came back upstairs the same. I'm not someone who scares easily. I grew up in Cleveland. I've seen enough in my life that most things don't shake me. But Sister Vera did. She was in her 70s, always dressed entirely in white hair, white dress, white shoes. I never once saw her wear another color. She attended the small, non-denominational church my aunt had gone to for years. Every single Sunday, without fail, she sat in the same pew front left aisle seat. She never sang during hymns, never bowed her head during prayer, never made small talk before or after the service. She just sat there, and she watched, not stared, watched. There's a difference. Staring is empty, unfocused. What she did was intentional, careful, like she was studying people, memorizing them, taking inventory. My aunt once told me Sister Vera had been a member longer than anyone could remember. Nobody knew where she had come from before that. Nobody could name a single relative. It was as if she had simply appeared one day and taken her seat and never left. She didn't feel lonely. She didn't feel forgotten. She felt permanent, like part of the building itself. And the first time I realized she wasn't just watching the congregation, but watching me specifically, was the Sunday I noticed she never blinked. I had only been to that church twice before the Sunday. Everything changed both times on Easter, both times just visiting with my aunt. I had never spoken to Sister Vera. No one had introduced us. As far as I knew, we had never even been close enough to exchange a glance. So when she stopped me in the parking lot after the service, took both of my hands in hers, and said softly, "Renee, I've been waiting for you to come back," my entire body locked up. The way she said my name wasn't questioning or polite. It was certain, familiar, like she had known me for years. I asked my aunt about it as we walked to the car, trying to keep my voice casual. The moment I told her, the color drained from her face. She swore she had never told Sister Vera my name. Not directly, not in conversation, not even accidentally. She was absolutely sure. I told myself there had to be a normal explanation. Churches keep directories. People talk. Someone could have mentioned it. There's almost always a logical answer, if you want one badly enough. So I pushed the unease aside. But the following Sunday, I went back. Even now, I don't fully understand why. It wasn't simple curiosity. It felt more like a pull, gentle but persistent, as if something had caught hold of an invisible thread inside me and was slowly reeling me in. I told myself I just wanted closure, proof that nothing strange was actually happening. Still, the moment I stepped through those church doors again, I felt the same quiet pressure settle over me, like I had walked into a place that already knew I was coming. From the plain canvas bag she always carried, she pulled out a small brown notebook, worn, creased, handled so often the edges looked soft. She opened it carefully to a specific page, as if she had marked it long ago, and placed it between us on the pew. My name was written there, not just my first name, my full legal name. Beneath it was my date of birth and my home address in Cleveland, a place I had never discussed with anyone at that church. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, old-fashioned, and below all of that was a single date, months in the future circled over and over until the paper looked almost carved. I remember the air feeling suddenly thinner, harder to breathe, as if the room itself were waiting for me to understand what I was looking at. Sister Vera didn't explain. She didn't smile. She just watched my face, as if she were checking whether something had finally clicked into place. I had never given that woman any of my information. I hadn't filled out a visitor card, hadn't spoken to her, hadn't even been properly introduced. There was no normal way she could have known my full name, my birthday, or my home address. My voice felt strange when I finally asked what the circled date meant. Sister Vera's lips curved into a smile, but something about it was wrong. It didn't match the rest of her face. It wasn't the stiffness of old age or illness. It looked like someone had studied what a human smile should be and recreated it, almost perfectly, but not quite. Too precise, too still, like a mask that didn't move with the skin beneath it. She said softly, "That's the day you'll stop running from it." The words landed with a weight I couldn't explain. I didn't ask what it was. I didn't want to know. I stood up so fast, the pew creaked loudly, turned, and walked away without looking back. For days afterward, I kept thinking about that notebook, that handwriting, that impossible page. But eventually, time passed. The circled date came, and nothing happened. No disaster, no revelation, no strange event I could point to. just an ordinary day like any other. I remember letting out a long breath, telling myself I had built it up into something bigger than it was. I filed it away under things I couldn't explain but didn't need to anymore. Then that night came. I dreamed I was back in the church. Not in the pew where I usually sat with my aunt, but in the front left pew, the exact seat Sister Vera always occupied, closest to the aisle, facing the entrance. I was dressed in white, not just light-colored clothes, completely white, from head to toe. My hands were folded in my lap, perfectly still, and my eyes were fixed on the door the way hers always had been, not staring blankly, but watching with purpose, waiting for something specific to happen. The church was silent, empty, frozen in a kind of unnatural stillness. Then I felt hands rest on my shoulders. Cold, light, familiar. Sister Vera stood behind me, leaning close enough that I could feel her breath near my ear. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, as she whispered, "There now, you understand." The words didn't sound threatening. They sounded satisfied, like a teacher pleased that a student had finally learned the lesson. I woke up suddenly, heart pounding, the room pitch black around me. But what frightened me most wasn't the dream itself. It was the feeling that lingered afterward. I lay there for a long time, trying to figure out what was wrong, why everything felt slightly shifted. I still felt like myself, my memories, my thoughts, my body were all there. And yet it was as if there was more of me than before, like something extra had been added, quietly, without permission. Or maybe something had finally stopped being hidden. Something had changed after that night. I couldn't point to anything specific. No new habit, no missing memory, no obvious sign, but the feeling lingered like a quiet echo inside me. Life went on. Months turned into years. I tried not to think about Sister Vera, about the notebook, about the dream. Then last year, my aunt called to tell me that Sister Vera had died peacefully at home at 91. The news should have felt ordinary. Old woman, long life, natural ending. But the moment I heard it, that same strange pressure settled in my chest again, like a door somewhere had just closed. My aunt mentioned something else. Sister Vera had left the church a collection of small brown notebooks, dozens of them, all identical to the one she had shown me. Curious, the pastor had flipped through a few. Page after page was filled with names, hundreds of them. Each name carefully written, each paired with a date and a full address, just like mine had been. No explanations, no notes, just lists. He dismissed them as the harmless journals of an eccentric old woman, and threw them away. Said they were private writings, nothing more. Maybe he was right, and I wonder how many of those people had the dream. How many of them woke up on their circled day feeling different, not broken, not possessed, just slightly altered, like something inside them had quietly shifted position. I wonder if any of them suddenly found themselves drawn back to that same church, to that same front left pew, aisle seat, eyes fixed on the door, without knowing why, waiting for someone, watching the way she used to watch. Because the last time I visited my aunt, I caught myself glancing toward that exact seat during the service, checking whether it was empty. Part of me was relieved that it was. Another part of me, a part I don't like to think about, felt something disturbingly close to disappointment, like I had arrived too early and was still expected to take my place when the time comes.